In April 2022, a man named Connor accepted a construction job far from home, part of a 3-month housing and work arrangement. The pay was decent, and he needed every penny. His financial situation wasn't great. The fact that his longtime buddy Jim would be working alongside him made it even better. They figured it would be a good way to earn extra cash, get away from the daily grind, and have a little adventure. The job itself wasn't bad, and after a few weeks, Connor had settled into a steady routine. But the site they were assigned to was remote, deep in the rural countryside. Long, twisting roads stretched for miles without a single house in sight. Connor liked nature, though, and saw it as a chance to unplug from everything. Most of his co-workers spent their weekends drinking, but Connor had other ideas. He craved solitude and quiet. When Friday night came, he packed his gear, planning a weekend of camping and hiking deep in the woods. There was a narrow trailhead about 5 minutes from the housing complex. That's where he began. Within 20 minutes of walking, the only sounds were the wind and the steady crunch of his boots on dirt. He smoked a couple joints on the way, feeling the stress of work melt away. The isolation was exactly what he needed. At first. Around 7 p.m., the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the trail. Connor realized he needed to find a spot to camp. That's when he smelled it, burning wood, and saw a thin haze of smoke drifting between the trees. At first, he assumed it was just another camper. But then he caught a flicker of orange firelight through the trees. Curious and feeling confident, Connor veered off the trail. He wasn't afraid. He had trained in combat sports during high school and stayed in shape. But something about this didn't sit right. As he moved closer, he spotted something odd. Shopping carts. Dozens of them. They were tied to trees with old ropes, hanging from branches, twisted and mangled into eerie shapes. It didn't look like a campsite. It looked like some kind of ritual site. Connor pulled out his phone and snapped a few photos, figuring nobody would believe him otherwise. Then he noticed something even stranger. Above the fire, suspended from a low branch, was a blackened duck ornament, and strapped onto its back was a scorched baby doll, its limbs twisted and melted by the flames. Connor's chest tightened. The fire was fresh. Someone had tended to it recently. Empty water bottles lay scattered around. Someone was either nearby or watching. He thought about turning back, but convinced himself it was probably just some weird local. Drunk, maybe. Still, he kept checking over his shoulder as he moved away from the site. He walked for another 20 minutes, putting real distance between himself and that scene. Daylight was fading fast. He needed firewood before nightfall. Veering off trail again, he gathered sticks and dry branches. He wasn't worried. He had some emergency wood packed, but it wouldn't last all night. After about an hour, Connor set up camp. He built a fire, pitched his tent, and cooked a steak and potato dinner in foil over the coals. He smoked another joint, letting the heat of the fire and the weed push away the unease. For a while, things felt normal. He ate, listened to some downloaded true crime podcasts, and dozed off under the dark forest canopy. There was no cell service, no interruptions, just crackling fire and eerie crime stories. At some point, he fell asleep, but not for long. He woke with a jolt. The fire had died down. His tent felt freezing inside. Checking his phone, 4 a.m., he sat up, confused. Then he heard it. Whistling. A slow, broken tune floated through the trees. Connor froze. It felt like his body had shut down. He lay completely still as the whistling crept closer. and then it stopped. Soft footsteps crunched over fallen leaves, fast and light, circling the tent. Connor's heart pounded so hard, he thought it might burst. Finally, his body kicked into motion. He grabbed his boots, tore out of the tent, and that's when fear became something worse. The footsteps weren't behind him. They were in front, toward the trailhead. The only way back to safety. Someone, or something, had cut off his exit. He had no choice but to run deeper into the woods. Connor sprinted through the brush, ducking low branches, stumbling over roots. Behind him, the footsteps multiplied. Fast, chaotic, out of sync. Not one person, two, maybe more. For 5 endless minutes, he ran. When his body gave out, he dove into a thick patch of trees, burying himself under leaves and branches. He stayed absolutely still, hardly daring to breathe. The footsteps grew distant. Eventually, there was only silence. Connor crawled through the underbrush for what felt like hours, every inch of his body scratched and bleeding. When the trees began to thin, he sprinted the rest of the way to the trailhead. Nobody followed. The forest was deathly silent, but the damage was done. Back at the accommodation, Connor filed a police report. The officers took his statement seriously but never found anything. Nobody was caught. Connor is convinced the same people who built that creepy shrine were the ones who chased him. What they were doing in those woods, and what they wanted, he'll probably never know. He completed his contract and went home, but he'll never forget the whistling, the footsteps, or the paralyzing fear that night. If there's one thing he learned, it's this. When something feels wrong, trust your gut and leave. Connor almost didn't, and he knows he's lucky to be alive to tell the story.